The Macedonian Uprising, known as the Kresna Uprising, was a revolt of the Macedonian people against Ottoman rule, launched on October 17, 1878, in the village of Kresna, in the Struma River valley of Pirin Macedonia. The events of the Great Eastern Crisis, 1875 to 1881, the Russo-Turkish War, the Treaty of San Stefano, and the Congress of Berlin had a profound impact on Macedonia. The revolutionary spirit among the Macedonian people grew stronger, especially after the uprising in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the liberation of Bulgaria by Russia during the Russo-Turkish War. In Macedonia, teachers, merchants, priests, and warriors began laying the groundwork for an armed revolt. Leading the way were prominent figures like Metropolitan Nathaniel of Ohrid and the seasoned revolutionary Dimitar Pop Georgiev Berovsky, who had already led the Razlovci uprising 2 years earlier. They were joined by other influential leaders and a network of determined voivodes across the region. One of the driving forces behind the upcoming rebellion would be the newly formed Unity Committees, organizations first set up as charitable groups, but soon deeply involved in coordinating both peaceful resistance and armed action. Their anger was specifically directed at the decisions made at the Berlin Congress, which had reversed the pro-Bulgarian terms of the San Stefano Treaty. Of the Unity Committees, the ones based in Sofia and Gorna Jumaja would prove the most influential and the most controlling. On September 8, 1878, at a secret meeting held at the Rila Monastery, Metropolitan Nathaniel gathered key leaders, including Berovsky and the aging but respected voivode Dedo Ilyo Maleshevsky. There they made a crucial decision. All guerrilla bands operating near the demarcation line were to converge around Gorna Jumaja. When they gathered, a military council was held. And it was during this gathering that Voivode Stoyan Karastoilov proposed a bold plan. The uprising should begin with a strike on the Ottoman garrison at Kresna. The proposal was accepted. Karastoilov would lead the opening attack. Still, even though the Macedonian commanders had taken the lead in organizing the rebellion, the Unity Committee, keen on maintaining some level of control, insisted that overall command be handed to a Russian officer in Bulgarian service, the Cossack Adam Kalmykov. Though reluctant, the Macedonian leaders accepted for the sake of unity, and so the uprising began. On October 17, 1878, 400 rebels and armed villagers, led by Stoyan Karastoilov, launched a surprise attack on the Ottoman troops stationed at the inns of Kresna. The fighting was fierce and lasted 2 full days. At first, the Turkish garrison resisted, expecting reinforcements from Melnik or nearby posts. But help never arrived. After hours of heavy combat, the rebels broke their will. The Ottomans surrendered. 109 Turkish soldiers were taken prisoner. The cost to the rebels was minimal, just 1 killed and 3 wounded, while the Ottomans lost 9 dead and 11 wounded. The victory sent shockwaves through the region, and Karastoilov's leadership was widely praised as the key reason behind the successful assault. With Kresna now liberated, the flames of rebellion spread fast. The rebel leaders wasted no time. In the newly liberated villages, they quickly established local self-governments and began forming new fighting units. A general command structure was put in place. Kalmykov was named Supreme Commander, Berovsky became Chief of Staff, and Karastoilov was confirmed as the main voivode of the rebel bands. The uprising wasn't just a military effort. It now took on the shape of a provisional state. A formal document was issued, known as the Rules of the Macedonian Uprising Committee, a kind of temporary constitution. It regulated every aspect of life in the liberated zones: governance, economy, justice, and military organization. The rebels declared, "It is well known to all of us that this ill-fated country of ours, Macedonia, owing to the egoistic aims of the great powers, was again left to Turkey after the Congress of Berlin. As a result of that, in certain regions of our fatherland, many scenes full of blood, known to all of us, took place. Desiring to throw off the Turkish yoke from our fatherland, each one of us, as much as possible, rose up to sacrifice himself, since help was needed from each of us. We rebelled as advocates of freedom. With the blood we shed all over the Macedonian fields and forests, we serve freedom, as the Macedonian army of Alexander of Macedon did, with our slogan, freedom or death. Yet owing to the events and the liberation of a great number of villages by our rebels, and the crying need to introduce order in the areas where the rebels are in action, we have decided to proclaim certain rules of the Macedonian Rebel Committee, or rather a constitution, to which we shall all conform, and the rules of which we shall all observe till the liberation of the whole of our fatherland, Macedonia. With a firm structure now in place, the rebellion pressed forward. To the east of the Struma River, rebels liberated territory up to the village of Belitsa, fighting off both regular Ottoman troops and the notorious irregulars known as Bashi Bazuk. On the western side of the Struma, even more progress was made. Much of the Petric district and the area known as Karşiyak came under full rebel control. But the path to full liberation would not be easy. Despite early successes, the Kresna Uprising was soon tested by more formidable challenges. The Macedonian rebels had managed to carve out a significant zone of control, but the Ottoman response was looming, and internal divisions were beginning to surface. The rebels attempted to push further south toward Strumica, liberating the village of Sushitsa. However, their advance was halted by Ottoman reinforcements from the city. Even greater resistance awaited on the eastern front. Near the village of Belitsa, the rebels faced prolonged, uneven battles against heavily fortified Ottoman troops and Bashi Bazuk auxiliaries. Stoyan Karastoylov personally led the operations in this sector, yet despite his determination, the rebels failed to break through. Ottoman forces, supported by artillery, held the line. Negotiations were attempted. Representatives of the uprising met with Turkish officials from Melnik in a temporary ceasefire. The Ottomans offered modest concessions, temporary tax relief for the villagers, but the rebel leaders demanded real autonomy and deep reforms. The talks collapsed. No agreement was reached. The inability to push beyond the Belitsa line marked a turning point. The uprising began to stall. But external interference would prove far more damaging than Turkish bullets. Tensions were rising between the Macedonian rebel leaders and the Bulgarian-backed unity committees. Though the uprising had Macedonian roots and leadership, the Bulgarian committees, supported by Russian officers, increasingly tried to steer it in their own direction. The Unity Committee, now pushing for greater control, pressured the rebels to strike deeper into Razlog Valley. The operation was led by Louis Wojtkiewicz, a Polish-born officer in Bulgarian service, and Bulgarian commander Bano Marinov. They managed to seize the town of Bansko and several surrounding villages. But during the fighting, Marinov was wounded, and without his leadership, the rebel hold on the area quickly weakened. After just 2 weeks, Ottoman troops launched a counteroffensive. The rebels were forced to retreat, and as they pulled back, the Ottoman army and Bashi Bazuk torched entire villages in retaliation. Macedonian civilians suffered the most. Homes were burned, livestock stolen, and many villagers who hadn't fled in time were either brutalized or killed. Hundreds fled across the border into Bulgaria. These military setbacks were followed by a political purge. Frustrated with the independent actions of Karastoilov and Berovsky, the Unity Committee dismissed them from leadership. Kalmykov and Voitkiewicz were reinstated as commanders. The situation only escalated. A special commission of 3 Bulgarian-aligned officials arrived and staged a military tribunal. The verdict was harsh. Stoyan Karastoilov, the very man who had led the first successful strike at Kresna and had become a symbol of the uprising, was sentenced to death. On December 6, 1878, he was executed. Berovsky, thanks to the intervention of Metropolitan Nathaniel Kuchevsky, was spared, though stripped of command in the Karshiak region shortly thereafter. The Macedonian leadership of the uprising had now been completely removed. The Unity Committee, based in Bulgaria, assumed full control. But with no local legitimacy and dwindling rebel morale, cracks began to show immediately. Meanwhile, the Ottomans were regrouping. By early 1879, preparations for a major counterattack were nearly complete. In mid-February, the Ottoman commander in Petric issued a call for the rebels to surrender. When they refused, he moved to crush them. Hussein Bey led a massive force, 8,000 regular troops and irregulars, into the heart of rebel territory. The resistance collapsed quickly. Overwhelmed, the remaining rebel fighters withdrew. The Ottoman army recaptured village after village. What followed was brutal. Villages were burned, properties looted, and civilians who had stayed behind were tortured or killed. Once again, thousands fled Macedonia, seeking refuge in Bulgaria. Desperate to reignite the resistance, the rebel leadership attempted a final push. Large numbers of fighters were sent deeper into Macedonia, into regions like Bitola, Vodin, and Kostur, hoping to inspire a new wave of revolt. But the people were exhausted, traumatized, and disillusioned. The flame had gone out. A final call to arms was issued on May 14, 1879, by the rebel committee based in the Malyshevo Mountains, but few answered. Realizing the uprising was beyond saving, Metropolitan Nathaniel Kuchevsky issued an order on July 6, 1879, from the village of Padej. All rebel detachments were to be demobilized, and their weapons collected and stored in the village of Buranovo. The Kresna Uprising was over. The Kresna Uprising was one of Macedonia's earliest and most determined attempts to break free from Ottoman rule. It was born out of frustration with international betrayal, driven by local leadership, and initially fueled by remarkable bravery and unity. Yet for a brief moment, Macedonia had dared to rise. The names of Kresna, Berovsky, and Karastoilov would not be forgotten. They had written the first chapter in a long, painful struggle for self-determination.